Herzlich willkommen zu unserem Webinar. Nachdem viele Teilnehmer aus dem südlichen Afrika dabei sind, wechsle ich nun zu Englisch. Welcome to our webinar on renewable energy in South Africa and Mozambique. My name is Martin Meischel, and I am the Austrian Trade Commissioner to Southern Africa. Reliable energy supply is a big issue in Southern Africa. Load shedding is unfortunately part of the daily life here in South Africa. What is load shedding? The definition is as follows: the deliberate shutdown of electrical power in parts of a power distribution system to prevent the failure of the entire system when the demand strains the capacity of the system. South Africa produces the majority of its electricity with coal. This fossil-based energy source is a big contributor to climate change. Decarbonization of the energy sector requires urgent action on a global scale. Renewable energy and energy efficiency measures can potentially achieve 90% of the required carbon reductions. And this is the reason for today's webinar, to showcase the possibilities for renewable energy in South Africa and Mozambique. To give you a quick overview of the program, I hand over now to my colleague Esther Cabau.
A warm welcome to everyone joining us here today. We have experts from the following organizations with us. We are joined by Green Cape, Mozambique, the South African Independent Power Producers Association, and the Development Bank of South Africa. Just a few quick house rules before we commence. Please remember to keep all your microphones muted at all times. And if there are any questions, please feel free to use the chat function, and we will be addressing all your questions thereafter at the end in our Q&A session. But without any further ado, Mandisa, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Esther. So I will talk on the decentralized insights of the South African renewable energy market. Okay. All right. I moved a bit quickly. Okay. Esther, can you help me? Looks like I want to go back to the very first slide. Thank you, this one. So I'll just start by a brief snapshot into South Africa's electricity supply industry. Where we get our base load as a country, as Martin has shared, is we rely heavily on coal. So installed capacity is at least 38 gigawatts, and that's compared to at least the 5 gigawatts that renewable energy projects are putting onto the national grid. Beyond that, he's also touched on load shedding. We are experiencing intermittent power shortages, and there was a record high of stage 6 in December of 2019. Stage 6 basically means at least 6,000 megawatts of load had to be shed from the system to avoid total shutdown. The utility is also trying to kind of decommission, and these are recommendations from the integrated resource plan. So the target looks to decommission at least 35,000 megawatts by 2050, of course. So definitely an opportunity for renewable energy sources that also have improved on their lead times, and I'll show you in the following slides. This is a diagram that just highlights some of the key dates that have led to the establishment of the REAP program, our renewable energy auction program that was started in 2010. In 2010, there was an establishment of the office that oversees the procurement of the renewable energy project. This follows at least a 7-year gap where there was a scheduling of the white paper on renewable energy. So there's a country, we have great policies, but I think we do kind of struggle or have, I guess, challenges implementing some of the implemented of the proposed policy reforms on renewable energy. Next slide, please. Thank you. And this is then the document, the living document that informs the allocations by per the technologies. You can see you have coal and you have the coal decommissioning, as well as I'd spoken about earlier, and then down to the solar PV and onshore wind and CSP. So the immediate opportunities would be where we are currently around 2020, 2021, up to 2024, but I'll speak to those opportunities in the following slides. But this is the document that informs the energy source mix as per the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy Department. And this is what also informs then the IPP office on what the scales and the technologies to be procured to the market for bidding and then connecting the project. Thank you. So far, this is what the RE program has achieved. This is by technology. So at the moment, at least 5 gigawatts of renewable energy is connected to the grid. And this is, again, thanks to the success of the RE program. And you can see the scales and also by technology, what has been successfully reached operation and what is yet to be determined. So what is still, an opportunity for the coming years in terms of renewable energy sources. Again, this speaks to the success and the highlights, but there's just the numbers of what has been procured so far from the 112 IPPs in the 7 bid rounds of the auction program, and 5 megawatts of electricity generated has successfully been connected to the national grid. At least 52 gigawatt hours of energy have been generated from renewable energy sources. And beyond just the energy supply, the investments that have come from the renewable energy investors, you'd see that it's at least 210 billion to date, and of that, at least 20% has been from the foreign investments to jobs and socio-economic contributions as well. So significant contributions to socio-economic challenges that we know of as a country. Next slide, please. Okay. Thank you. And again, just down to how the bid prices have declined over the years, with bid window 1 looking at least R3.65 for solar PV and R3.55 for CSP. And even though CSP continues to be, quite pricey, it has also experienced quite, drastic declines, where we have recorded a low of 62 cents per kilowatt hour that was bid for the expedited run. So that again highlights just the learning curves, the industry development, and also local manufacturing, and capabilities that have been built with the success of the program. And we hope to see more of that in the near future, with more targets to connect renewable energy into the national grid. Okay. I'm struggling here. Please help me, Esther. Yeah, that one. I think it's 8. Slide 8. Thank you. At the moment, for public procurement, as I'd mentioned, what is, I guess, an emerging opportunity, or if you look at what the IPP office is currently busy with, they're currently busy with bid window 5, which had an allocation of 2.6 gigawatts. 1.6 was allocated to onshore wind and 1 gigawatt to solar PV. Based on the announcements and determinations that we heard of from last year, we do anticipate bid window 6 and bid window 7 from this year in August until next year, January 2022. So the bid windows the momentum is quite picking up, and we do anticipate that will also kind of catalyze a lot of demand for local industries to kind of provide some local capability to make sure that the projects do meet these tight deadlines. And this opportunity specifically is to sell only to the national utility Eskom as the off-taker. So you would bid for this project to only produce renewable energy and sell it to Eskom. Next slide, please. Thank you. Then on the private procurement opportunity, sometime this year, our President Ramaphosa made a very exciting and a key announcement on licensing exemptions for projects that are sized to 100, and initially that you needed to be at least above 1 meg projects above 1 meg needed a licensing, but to have that, key announcement has, excited the private sector. This also allows energy-intensive users to play in that space where now they can build sizable systems for self-generation and can build surplus power, but this is also subject to connection agreements. And again, this allows them to sort of alleviate any operational, disruptions that have been caused by power outages, and also the increasing tariff price from Eskom, and also offset key environmental impacts. Next slide, please. And with the rolling, procurement rounds and pipeline, we do anticipate that local manufacturing and skills development can then be built to meet that demand. We know that there are also renewable energy development zones and special economic zones that can be, well placed to play and support local manufacturing. And another thing is, the African Continental Free Trade Agreement has also repurposing of the core fleet and green hydrogen opportunities. So with more renewable energy coming online, there are more sector coupling opportunities that are unlocked. I'm not sure if I can continue to the last slide, the next one as my last slide. So this would be what the renewable energy development zones look like, where the colors kind of indicate the transmission corridors, where you have transmissions along those lines, and then there are key points where renewable energy could choose to set up and set up with less strain and delay due to what the renewable energy development zones would support in building these projects. I'm sure I'm over time, Esther.
Thank you so much, Mandisa, for your insightful inputs and presentation on Green Cape and the renewable energy sector in South Africa. I will now hand over to Mr. Emmett Castell, who is a board member for the Mozambican Association of Renewable Energy in Mozambique. Emmett, the floor is yours. Emmett, if you could please unmute yourself, please, thank you.
I trust you can hear me now. Thank you. First and foremost, thank you very much to the Austrian Trade Commission for hosting this event and for inviting the Mozambican Renewable Energy Association to participate. Without further ado, we'll get started. There we are. Cool beans. So just quickly, I'll give a brief introduction as to the Mozambican Renewable Energy Association. We were created in 2017, and we are a business association, so we are focused on representing the interests of our members and representing the sector's priorities. We act as a natural facilitator or interlocutor in between the public sector, the donor community, and the private sector. And all in all, our objective is to facilitate the development of and the growth of the sector writ large. Key accomplishments from 2020, real quick, just got to toot our own horn. We've got a membership base of over 65 members and growing. This is a solid network that's been built off of a range of different engagements, community communication activities, workshops, webinars, and then some. We've developed a strong ecosystem of partners. Some of them you guys might recognize. All is to say that we do welcome more institutional partnerships across the board. And of late, we've really invested in being able to offer to our members and to our stakeholders writ large, and legal advisory services. We have an in-house legal advisor to provide services and advice and orientation to our members, and then some. Couple of quick overview in terms of what's new in the market. The Mozambican renewable energy market is anything but static. We have a range of different updates and new initiatives, programmatic interventions, and even legislative initiatives. If we look at the large-scale utility space in terms of IPPs, we have had the development of a new auction program, which follows in the footsteps of what the South Africans have set as a precedent in terms of moving from what was previously the standard operating process, which was direct adjudication of projects, which is a very nebulous and obfuscated process, into a much more transparent auction-based adjudication program. And this has been led through by a program and pioneered by a program called ProLair, which is financed by the AFD and through the European Union. We've had developments in wind. We haven't actually any projects actually commissioned as of yet. They're all in the project development phase, but there is indication that these projects will be moving forward. I am a personal fan of hydro electric power generation, and I'd like to toot the horn that Mozambique has at least 25, if not 30% of Africa's hydro resources to be leveraged and developed. And I know the Austrians are large proponents of hydroelectric power generation, so that's something for you guys to look towards. Just moving away from IPPs into the off-grid space, we have now a very strong and fertile ecosystem of solar home system companies and let's say last mile distribution descos. The mini grid space in the context of Mozambique is still in a nascent place, but we have recently undergone the review of a new off-grid energy access decree, of which the Mozambican Renewable Energy Association participated in the revision of this document. Moving on, in terms of upcoming tender programs, we have ProLair, which I mentioned. We have Get Fit through the Germans, and also an IFC solar program that will be following in the same mold. To boot, we have a wide range of donor-led programs and initiatives that private sector actors can benefit from, whether with direct concessional funding or technical support. And finally, on the regulatory front, and as I've already mentioned, we had the new off-grid energy access law that we have currently has been submitted to the council, the Technical Council of Ministers. We have also recently engaged with a current revision of the electricity law, If you go to AMER's website, you'll be able to find the law in Portuguese and in English, and also our comments and review of the actual document. Challenges from the from COVID. I think we're all a little fed up with talking about all the problems with COVID. I will say just on the surface of things that Mozambique has gone off relatively lightly in terms of the impact and adverse effects. Across the board, it definitely has hampered project development and the project development timeline, but this goes without saying in most contexts. That said, what we will see in terms of what are the opportunities, we see this rapid evolving regulatory landscape, which is a great opportunity for the private sector to develop and cut out its role. We see a wide range of donor-led initiatives that are providing concessional funding and technical assistance to the private sector. So this is definitely of note. And we also see a much more proactive and forward-facing attitude from government as far as development and engagement with the private sector. Sorry, forgive me, I'm trying to change the slide. Maybe a slight hiccup. Okay, I'm going to try it again. Ooh, there we go. I think we went. But I think that slide was, so what's new in the context of Mozambique? I've highlighted a lot of new initiatives as far as the off-grid energy access decree and the revisions to the electricity law. AMER, in conjunction with our partners ALER and the donor-led initiative Get Invest, organized a Renewables in Mozambique, Europe-Mozambique Investment Forum. You can find all the recordings and all of the presentations from that conference on our website, and you can also find the recordings on our YouTube page. We also took the opportunity to launch a briefing, briefing Renewables in Mozambique 2021, which is a fantastic compendium of infographics, stats, and a range of other key information about the renewable energy sector in Mozambique. And I'll show you guys a little snippet of that in just a second, actually. This is just to give you a taste of what the conference was. We had a range of different strategic institutional partners. Not to worry if you missed it. Most of the key takeaways and findings are translating into actual initiatives that we're taking forward in conjunction with our partners. Let's see what's here. If anybody's interested in checking this briefing, it's split up into 6 general chapters, just general data with an overview of the sector, an overview of the legal and regulatory concerns. Although since we published this, we had the off-grid energy access decree, and then we've then shared the new revision to the electricity law. So this is inevitably going to be out of date pretty soon. What is probably of most interest to most of the stakeholders who have joined this session is this IPP space, and we do cover that comprehensively. And then, of course, we cover mini grids, solar home systems, and the clean cooking space. And you can access this briefing if you just go to this link, lerrenovables.org, which is hosted through one of our partner organizations, ALER. This is just to give you a taste of what this briefing offers. It's in both English and in Portuguese, and as it's divided into the 6 general sections, and you can see in general and get a sense of what the current state of affairs is in terms of renewable energy projects in the context of Mozambique. I won't dawdle too long here, just we got to keep with time. I had thought to share with you a video. So we made actual infographics and animated infographics of all of these different, of the whole briefing. I invite one and all to go to AMER's YouTube page to check out this video. It's in both English and in Portuguese, and allows you to rapidly and easily digest this information if you don't want to read through it. This is just to give you guys a taste and of an overview of all the donor-led initiatives that are currently available. Most, for that matter, do provide some kind of TA to the private sector, and there is a large variety do actually provide actual concessional funding whether through grants or otherwise, to the private sector. And here you get a pretty comprehensive overview by sector, by donor. And if you need more information and support engaging with these various initiatives, by all means, do follow up with us. Off-grid energy access degree, I've already spoken to this. A couple of key highlights and key takeaways. The scope of and the range for regulation by government of the off-grid space has been defined and made clear, whereas there was a lot of ambiguity in the past. There is now an energy cadastre for coordinating and ensuring that all projects are registered, and at least there's a high level of coordination in terms of registering where these various investments are taking place. There are stricter guidelines and requirements as far as local content, but there's a much clearer investment and operating regime that's being established that will allow for the private sector to invest in coordination with government. Ooh. You know, it's okay if we jump that slide. That was just kind of, you know, a much more in detail review of the specific amendments. What I wanted to just highlight with this slide is that if you do head to our mayor's website, you'll be able to find a proverbial bevy of resources and content that can provide and shed much more light and detail on some of these new regulatory initiatives which we're engaging with. This is just kind of give you a sense of the level of detail and the level of engagement that we have been providing through this process. In summary, what does Mozambique offer? We do have an evolving landscape on the regulatory front. This does bring with it some uneasiness and some ambiguity, but the hope is that we will be able to provide some clarity and runway forward. We have a plethora of donor-led initiatives to support the private sector, and this is not an opportunity to be missed upon. We have a growing domestic ecosystem of private sector actors, and we welcome all entities that are interested in familiarizing yourselves with the Mozambican space to reach out to us. We can, if not provide most answers, point you in the right direction and offer you some suggestions in terms of networking and potential stakeholders and partners to engage with. And then finally, government has definitely doubled down on renewable energy and is putting a lot of its commitments and investing in renewable energy writ large. So in summary, there's lots of opportunity. The Mozambican market does have its challenges, but let's speak of the opportunities. And by all means, please do reach out to us and come talk to us. We'd be more than happy to field your questions and to support your engagement in the context of Mozambique. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Emmett, for your very informative presentation, as well as giving us scope into what the mayor does in the energy sector in Mozambique. Next, I will be handing over to Mr. Dave Long, who is the Secretary General for the South African Association of Independent Power Producers. Dave, you can take it away.
All right. Well, thank you very much to Esther and indeed the Trade Commissioner for inviting me to make a short presentation. I represent an independent body that looks after the interests of IPPs in South Africa. That said, the trade organizations in South Africa are largely technology-based, the Wind Association, the PV Association, and others, whereas we technology agnostic. We have our roots in industrial and mining energy issues. And so it's not surprising that we represent large coal, paper manufacturers, chemical, sugar, other associations who look after similar members. And we're here to promote the interests of IPPs, technology agnostic, as I say, and to assist our members in whatever it is they're trying to achieve in the IPP space. Next slide, please. So I've been asked to briefly summarize policy issues, the recent regulatory developments, and potential projects. So a brief policy background is on the next slide. The 1998 white paper on energy has already been mentioned by Dbsa, and it is despite its age and despite government not altogether following what it suggests, it remains a very important document for those who want to know how the South African energy space has developed. The Electricity Regulation Act is vital to anybody who wants to install and invest in generation in South Africa, because it provides the controls and regulations for, amongst others, generators. And it has very recently been subject to some changes in its regulatory section, which I'll come to later. Then our early development of renewables was centered around NERSA and their attempts to develop feed-in tariffs for both renewable energies and cogeneration. But that didn't work out because it was in conflict with our constitution. And so government launched the Renewable Procurement Program in 2011, of which Dbsa has given you the details. And that continues to this day, and we're expecting it to continue into the future. And it's predicated and based upon the Integrated Resource Plan, a copy of which you have seen, but for anybody who needs the details, I've given the reference to the Government Gazette there. And what follows in this next slide is the same as what you have just been presented in the first speaker. I'd like to point out that the final column is also subject to ongoing procurement. It's the so-called emergency procurement. The acronym is RM for risk mitigation, I-P, Independent Power Producer Procurement Program. And this is the one that is seen quite a lot of activity in the popular press, because the preferred bidders have been announced, and some 1.3 gigawatts of the 2 gigawatt program are associated with power ships that the intent is to moor in 3 of our harbors. And these are now subject to environmental and other challenges through the courts. Next slide, please. In terms of regulation, our regulations in terms of the Electricity Regulation Act requires that the minister makes a determination of what power is going to be procured nationally. And this is sent to the National Energy Regulator for their concurrence. This process has been followed in all of the procurement that has taken place and is currently taking place now. To be noted, however, is that a ministerial determination of 1.8 gigawatts was made for cogeneration, but there's been a somewhat unsuccessful procurement of cogeneration, and so there's a large amount of cogeneration that has been determined to be procured that in fact hasn't come to the market yet. Schedule 2 of the Electricity Regulation Act is what is currently consuming the national debate. The original Electricity Regulation Act had it that you didn't need a license for a variety of different activities, including generation for your own use. So cogenerator producing power for their own use did not require a license. This, however, changed in 2017, and the current requirement is that anything over 1 megawatt, be it for own use or for sale to a third party, requires a license. And it's associated with this 1 megawatt cap that President Ramaphosa 3 weeks ago made an announcement that that 1 megawatt cap would now become 100 megawatts, to the great joy of many of us who've been working hard in this space to try and get this changed. However, the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy are to redraft the legislation that contains this 100 megawatt change. And there's a lot beside the 100 megawatts that we anticipating could or could not become a problem. And one of the issues that we need clarity on is the wheeling rules. These are NERSA rules for wheeling power between a generator and a load. It's a difficult set of regulatory rules right now, and we're looking to have this changed. Next slide, please. Then finally, I was asked to touch on the projects that our Austrian colleagues might be interested in. The renewable rounds 1 to 4 in their various capacities have come and gone, so there's no interest there, as is the risk mitigation IPP, which is the 2,000 megawatts of emergency power. We're not too sure what government is going to do with the potential risks to some of their preferred bidders in terms of the power ships. We'll have to see what transpires there. And then round 5 of the renewable program is very much in progress. Anybody interested in that, they would have had to already been on this program, because the bid closing date is mid-August. Other things of interest for biomass equipment suppliers, we have done a survey of the commercial forestation in South Africa, taken some broad estimates of how much biomass is available, and our estimates are there's about 5,500 megawatts of biomass from our commercial forests, so there's an opportunity, of which only about 40 megawatts, I think, is currently running. Then a recent estimate by Meridian Economics said there was about 5,000 megawatts of potential investment if this 100 megawatt cap is lifted, as we expect it to be. And then our own survey, very recent, last month, of what this lifting of the cap would mean, yielded 16 projects of about a total of 615 megawatts was being developed by our members, and then some very large projects over the 100 megawatt limit as well. And I'd also very briefly like to cover cogeneration, because studies have also been done on that. Next slide, please. This comes from a pulp and paper background, but cogeneration in South Africa, next slide, please, as a potential of the 6,219 there from that particular report. It's a little dated now, 3 years ago, but we have no better information in the country. But for anybody producing cogeneration equipment or support and ancillary services, we see a huge opportunity for industrialists to do the right energy thing and produce combined heat and power. Next slide, please. So all in all, we see great opportunity. Some of the regulatory changes are now coming through that will make our lives a lot easier, and we hope our colleagues in Austria will see South Africa as a destination for their investments. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dave, for your presentation. Last but certainly not least, we have Mr. Stefan Burning from the Development Bank of South Africa, who will speak to finance structures in the sector. Thank you, Stefan.
Yeah, thank you very much, Esther, and thank you for the time. I'll do a brief introduction of the DBSA and then speak more specifically about the renewable energy space. I will give it a try to change the slide. If it doesn't change in a few seconds, Esther, if you don't mind changing it. Just to briefly indicate, so the DBSA is a development finance institution wholly owned by the government of South Africa. The name DBSA, or Development Bank of Southern Africa, is a bit misleading. It probably should have been called the Infrastructure Development Bank of Southern Africa, because our full focus and our mandate really is on infrastructure development. And it's infrastructure development in the four primary sectors that you see on the slide here, it being transport, energy, telecommunications, and water infrastructure. The reality, though, is that energy is the largest share of our portfolio, particularly with regard to investments in the REAP program that has been discussed at length in this webinar already. What I do need to mention is that it's important to note that DBSA is a funder of projects, of fully developed projects. We do not fund component suppliers or contractors, subcontractors into projects. We would anticipate that component suppliers, subcontractors already get in touch with the actual sponsors of projects, and we then fund the project as a whole and negotiate with the sponsors. The mandate, and again, Esther, if you can change the slide. Our mandate is across the whole of Africa, so we do operate across the whole of Africa. The primary focus is though on SADC, the Southern African Development Community, and certain specific countries are north of SADC, such as Nigeria, Ghana, and the East Africa, particularly Ethiopia, Kenya, Uganda, and Rwanda. But certainly we're open to opportunities in all countries across the continent. I'll try again to change the slide, and Esther, I'll probably have to ask you to do that again, just for the last slide. Really, for us, renewable energy falls under the broader concept of climate finance. Obviously, it's only one component of climate finance, but I've focused my slide really on this aspect. The DBSA is accredited across a number of global, climate facilities, including the Global Environmental Facility, the GCF, which is the Green Climate Fund, and various other climate-related initiatives. And just to highlight a few of those, the Renewable Energy Program has been discussed at length already in this webinar, but just to mention that DBSA is one of the largest funders into this Renewable Energy Program, not just from a senior debt point of view to project companies, but also from equity-linked financing to particularly to BE players who are looking to invest in this program. We then are quite involved in a number of funds and initiatives, including the Green Fund, the Green Climate Facility, and what is becoming more and more relevant now is the Embedded Generation Initiative. And what this really is that we manage funds on behalf of other stakeholders that provide various credit enhancement mechanisms for projects. So this can include grant funding, interest subsidies, concessional loans, and also to some extent equity funding. And in some instances, in order to make these projects bankable, we provide these additional credit enhancements to allow for financing to flow into these projects. And then lastly, a big component of what the DBSA does as well is project preparation funding. And what we see in this regard is where projects that have proven the early feasibility, have done their pre-feasibility studies, but require further funding to complete their feasibilities, whether that be actual feasibility studies or development of the actual project finance models or those aspects. We as DBSA would provide funding to those projects and in return take possibly a small equity stake or some sort of multiple of return if the project is successful, in order to assist those projects to get to bankability. What we certainly have seen a lot not just in South Africa, but across the continent, is that there are a lot of good project ideas, but there's not the funding to get these projects to bankability stage and to prepare them to such an extent that even international funders can fund them. And so this is really the purpose of the project preparation facilities. So overall, in summary, I can just mention that obviously renewable energy funding is a critical component for the Dbsa and for funding of the Dbsa. I won't go into too many more details and examples, but certainly if there are any questions from any participants at any point, feel free to get hold of the Dbsa either directly or through the Austrian Trade Commission, and I'd be then happy to lead you in the right direction, whether it be to our Green Fund or directly to our project finance team that does the funding for these projects. It's a bit of a short presentation, but I hope it gives you a brief overview of what the Dbsa does in this space. Thank you, Esther.
Thank you, Stefan. Thank you to all our participants for participating today. I'm going to hand over now to Martin Marshall, our Trade Commissioner, to continue on with the rest of the webinar.
Martin, you have to unmute yourself.
I'm sorry, had to press one button. Thank you again to all the presenters. And it's been very interesting to hear about the current developments and the future projects in Southern Africa. I do have one question which I would like to address to Mandisa and to Emmet. What is the best way for an Austrian company to engage in the South African or Mozambican market? How do I best get in touch with the ideal persons? If I could first address it to Mandisa, please.
Thank you, Martin. So what I'd suggest is getting in contact with the key industry association. I think Emmett will add on that as well, on the value add that you, as an investor new to a location, you would want to associate with the relevant established structures through the associations. So definitely through the associations. And us as Green Cape, we also publish annual market intelligence reports, and that is done through the engagements we have with our stakeholders, industry, academia, policymakers. So you can also get in contact with me, and I will facilitate, an impartial and partially point you to the right stakeholders for the kind of services and knowledge that an investor would need. We as Green Cape also, sector desk work. We do receive queries from interested investors that are looking to partner, JV, joint venture opportunities. So it will depend on what your requirements are as an Austrian investor looking to enter the South African market. But I have shared my details on my presentation, but I'll also drop them on the chat box if anyone's interested to take the discussion offline.
Thank you, Mandisa. Emmet?
Cool beans. Yes, as Mandisa said, check in with your local industrial association and as your point of departure. We'll be more than happy to point you in the right direction. As I always say, if I can't answer your questions, or if one of our board members can't answer one of your questions, within the vibrant ecosystem of private sector actors and then some, we can definitely identify the answer to your quandary. But I'd like to maybe just use a little bit of a case study in terms of, what happens, you're interested in coming to Mozambique, you give us a ring, we say, okay, here are local actors who can potentially be service providers. Here are the relevant government agencies that you should definitely sit down with. If you are coming into the Mozambican market completely greenfield, there is a bevy of documentation that you can digest. There are a range of different donor support programs that you can interact with that can help begin to put some flesh on the bones, so to speak. If you are a little bit more forward thinking and have a better understanding of what you want to do, maybe let me use the case study of Global Ec, which is a very large private equity entity that's, I'm sure is also active in South Africa, but it's all over the map. It's one of the largest private equity investment funds operating in the energy space in Africa. When they came to Mozambique, they identified a couple of local partners. They just began the commissioning of their 16 megawatt solar project in one of the most remote provinces in Mozambique. But in tandem to the development of this solar project, which was a real need for the Mozambican grid and has really, you know, let's say, stopped a gap that we had in our transmission and our generation, they also got involved with the development of the 468 Teman gas project, which has been developed in conjunction with funding from the AFDB, and as Sazal is one of the main anchoring clients. So in Mozambique, not to sell the oil and gas space, because here we are talking about renewables, but here's a classic example of an entity that came to the Mozambican space, identified a range of different opportunities, developed the right kind of local contacts, local partnerships, engagement with government, and was able to successfully develop a 16 megawatt solar project and to be part of a very major mega 468 megawatt gas project. So just quickly there. And in terms of getting in contact with us, you can just go to our website for our contact details, but info@amer.org.mz, and we'll reach out and get in touch with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Emmett. You made a really good call for being active in Mozambique. There's one more question for Dave. On one of your slides, you mentioned hydro in 2030. Any reason for the late start?
Martin, yeah, interesting question. And I was part of the negotiations at NEDLAC for the IRP 2019. And to be honest, hydro was such a small element in the bigger picture, dominated, of course, by PV and wind and the decommissioning of the coal power fleet, that I can't give you a definitive answer. However, as you know, South Africa is a water scarce country, and so the opportunities for hydro within the country are limited. But the longer term government thinking has been to import hydroelectricity from the Congo River, but more of that later. We haven't heard too much of that in the last 18 months.
Thank you, Dave. And I also have one question for Stefan. You mentioned the feasibility studies. Could you give us a little bit more details of that, please?
Yeah, so what this refers to, as indicated, is that we see a lot of projects that are, we get approached for projects that are not fully bankable yet, and that means there's certain studies are outstanding, and often the sponsors then don't have the necessary funds to complete those studies, and that include things like environmental and social impact assessments, developing financial models, requiring funding for legal services to negotiate contracts, and also developing of feasibility studies that are required for the project. So what Dbsa then is able to do is to provide funding to achieve those objectives of ensuring that those studies are in place, so that eventually the project becomes bankable, not just by the Dbsa, but by other financiers as well. So what we then do as Dbsa is, if the project, so we go at risk. If the project is not successful, that is at the risk of Dbsa. If the project does then proceed to bankability and it does reach financial close, we'll either take a small equity stake or a multiple of what we've invested as return for the original risk that we've taken on this.
Thank you very much, Stefan. We have come now to the end of this webinar. It has been very interesting to hear from all our experts. Again, thank you to the experts who took time today to talk to us. I would also like to say thank you to our colleagues in the headquarters in Vienna for setting up this webinar. If you have any further questions, or if you would like to get the slides of this webinar, please feel free to contact our Trade Commission, our email address, johannesburg@wko.at. And of course, if you have any other questions regarding entering the South African market or Mozambique or any other country which we are dealing with, please feel free to get in touch with us. We will be happy to help you. And thank you again for taking your time. We're looking forward to hearing from you. Goodbye.